Hey guys! So today we are going to talk about the concept pixel perfect. So let's get into it. Now, what do I mean by pixel perfect? Well, it kind of depends on, it may be a negative term to quite a few people, and from a few bad experiences back in the day, I would say that there is a negative tone to it to us as well. For me, it doesn't have to be, but there is, and let me just elaborate a little bit. So one of the things that is extremely frustrating, for at least for me, and I know it's frustrating for quite a few people, and I think that there is this unspoken rivalry between different groups within IT, and a classic one is between the developers and design, where there is this, let's just call it rivalry. First, the designer asks for something, the developer tries to build it, and the developer builds it with their mindset, and the designer designs from their mindset, and then they look at the results, and the designer is displeased because the things that the developer is supposed to do isn't like up to the standards of the designer, and the developer looks at the designer and thinks that they are just being nitty-gritty and like being difficult, that sort of thing. This relationship can very easily spring up in a lot of cases, in my experience. And the way that I've actually been in situations where it's been like almost like at a kid level, where you have what we used to call the design check, where the designer goes through the work that has been produced and stops the release and so forth because there are pixels off here and there. And the engineers feel frustrated because, hey, does that really matter? The designer gets frustrated because it does matter, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'll just give you a little bit of a take on this, and if you find yourself in this situation, I hope you don't, because there's I haven't had this issue with all the designers I've worked with. Sometimes I have had, and the best designers I know are the sort of people who, they make something absolutely perfect, but they also have the ability to step back and see, all right, we have a deadline, we have certain things that we need to consider, or there are technical limitations with one approach over another, maybe we should go this way or that way, and so forth and so forth. Whether or not you should compromise with design, I leave that to brighter people than myself, but it is at least very nice to have that sort of working environment with somebody. So, when it comes to pixel perfect, the idea is basically that the artboards that you are provided should completely match with what's actually out in the real world, in production. This is extremely hard to do. It is extremely hard to do unless you have, well, I would say just overall, it's actually so hard to do that it's almost all but, you really need to have an eye for design to be able to do this. The way, I'm going to be honest with you, I have a working understanding of design, but I don't have the sort of eye that designers have, because it takes a lot of skill and a lot of training to get that sort of thing, or at least a very good natural aptitude for it. I personally do. I remember when we had a release cycle, and this is something that I can give away as a tip. When you design things on a page-by-page basis, it is very, at least in my experience, easy for you to forget certain things, because as you're working, I don't know why this is, but it's so easy for there to become a mismatch between what's in the artboards and what's actually on the page, because the more stuff that you have and all these tiny little details and so forth, they start to add up, right? And you get this blind spot. And what's interesting is that it's not just, in my experience, it's not just the developer who does it, it's actually even the designers sometimes, they don't even think about it. It's just they need to go back and reference their artboard to see that, oh, there's a mismatch. I've actually had a very nice example of this, where I remember I was in this confrontation with the design department a while back, where they felt that our engineering department wasn't producing enough quality work, and that they had to review things so much. And I said, well, let me just ask you this. I understand that we're going for perfection, and I understand that we want things to be really nice looking and so forth, but we've shown these artboards, we've shown these designs to not just everybody in the engineering, but also to our managers, our product owners, and so forth and so forth. And only time anybody has said that there seems to be an issue is when we've given it to the designer that has actually made it. So the question is there a problem? If you can only spot the issues with the layout and the design itself, if you hold a reference, in other words, you have two examples. You have one thing that you in your mind know is to be the correct thing, and you have one thing that is supposed to be the thing that matches that. If that's the only time you can see an issue, I want just to have an open question. Is that an issue? So far, nobody has really been able to answer me on that one. But it's just a thought. But in order for us to be able to make things pixel perfect, I will give you 2 tips that I use in order to do this. First and foremost, design things at a component level. That's the biggest tip I can give you, because the more stuff that the UI has, the harder it is to keep everything in your head. It is much easier for you to actually do like a component by component type of thing. So when you have a big layout, start with one component, get it to look exactly and behave exactly as the way that your designer has described. Put that on the page, get feedback, go to the designer, talk to them, see if that's exactly what they want. Once that's done, you start with the next thing. Don't try to build the whole thing at the same time, because you're going to forget things, most likely. It's just experience here, guys. I can't prove this. At least that's how it goes for me. The second thing is that you should have a look at a tool that I use, which is called actually Pixel Perfect. It's a Chrome extension, which is very useful, where you can actually take a snapshot of an image, and all it really allows you to do is to set the opacity level on that image. And what's very beautiful about that is that now you can take the component that is in the artboards. If you have a designer who is like really picky with the artboards, it should be exactly as the artboards. They put their heart and soul into this. If you want to show them the respect that they are due, take this plugin, get the image off the thing, and adjust the opacity and just put it right over the component you just made, and they should align perfectly. And that's, at least for me, it's a good exercise, so that when I have this blind spot for certain things, that I can at least see that, oh, okay, this is actually matching the thing that we've talked about. But then of course, on the designer side of things, then it's also very important for you to have those artboards updated, so that I can actually do this. Because if you come over to me and say, oh, make this blue instead of red or something like that, I might forget about it. But hopefully we have a good working relationship, and we can come to some type of, we can iterate or something of that nature. So what I want you to take away from this, guys, is that when it comes to delivering pixel perfect UIs, start with the small components first, because it's easier to make a small thing perfect than it is to make the whole thing perfect on the first, immediately. Start that way and iteratively produce it, and use something like Pixel Perfect and so forth to match your artboards, to make sure that you always have a reference to the thing that you're actually going to build. It helps a lot. Have a great day.